Welcome to Grave Hush. This is a channel where we share horror bedtime stories to help you relax, fall asleep, and enjoy the calm of the night. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Tell us where you're listening from and what time it is right now as you're tuning in. Sit back, get comfortable, and let the story begin. An hour ago, someone left a blood-stained notebook on my doorstep with instructions to tell everyone what happened to me. The notebook contains the most disturbing account of home invasion I've ever read, and it will make you check every closet in your house before going to sleep tonight. This happened to Amanda Foster, a 31-year-old marketing manager who lived alone in a 2-story colonial house in suburban Atlanta. Amanda worked long hours and often came home exhausted, falling asleep quickly and sleeping deeply through the night. Amanda first noticed something was wrong when she started finding muddy footprints in her house that didn't match her shoes. The prints appeared overnight, leading from her back door through her kitchen and up the stairs to her bedroom. Amanda assumed someone was breaking into her house while she slept, so she installed motion-activated security cameras and changed all her locks. But the footprints continued appearing, and the security cameras never detected any intruders entering or leaving her property. Amanda reviewed hours of footage and discovered something that made her blood freeze. The cameras showed her sleepwalking through her house in the middle of the night, but Amanda had never experienced sleepwalking in her life. The footage showed Amanda walking through her house with jerky, unnatural movements, leaving muddy footprints despite having gone to bed with clean feet. But the most disturbing part was Amanda's facial expression during these sleepwalking episodes. Her eyes were open but completely white with no visible pupils, and her mouth hung open in a way that looked more like death than sleep. Amanda consulted with Dr. Michael Torres, a sleep specialist who conducted overnight studies of her sleeping patterns. Dr. Torres discovered that Amanda wasn't actually sleepwalking. She was being controlled by an external force during her unconscious states. Brain scans showed that during these episodes, Amanda's consciousness was completely suppressed while something else operated her body like a puppet. Amanda installed cameras inside her bedroom to document what was happening during her sleep. What she captured made her realize she was in deadly danger. Every night around 2 a.m., Amanda's body would sit up in bed with her eyes rolled back, showing only white. She would then stand and walk through her house for exactly 90 minutes before returning to bed. But during these episodes, Amanda moved like a corpse, stiff limbs, no natural breathing patterns, and movements that defied normal human anatomy. Amanda's research revealed that her house had belonged to Marcus Reed, who had died of a drug overdose in Amanda's bedroom in 2019. Marcus had been found 3 days after his death, and his body had been severely decomposed. Amanda realized that Marcus's spirit was possessing her body during her sleep, using her physical form to continue existing in the material world. But Amanda discovered something more horrifying about Marcus's possession. Every night he controlled her body, Amanda aged rapidly and showed signs of physical deterioration that matched Marcus's decomposed state at the time of his death. Amanda's hair was falling out, her skin was becoming gray and mottled, and her muscles were atrophying as Marcus's spirit consumed her life force to maintain his presence. Amanda tried exorcism, psychiatric treatment, and moving to different locations, but Marcus's attachment to her had become permanent and followed her anywhere she went. Amanda's final notebook entries described her physical transformation accelerating. She was aging decades in weeks. Her body was beginning to smell like decay, and she could feel Marcus's consciousness taking control during her waking hours. Amanda's last entry simply read, "He's winning. I can feel myself dying while he gets stronger. Soon there will be nothing left of me, and Marcus will have a permanent body to inhabit." Amanda's notebook was found by police after neighbors reported a foul smell coming from her house. Inside, they discovered a severely decomposed body that appeared to have been dead for months, but the death had occurred only days earlier. The body was identified as Amanda Foster through dental records, but the rapid decomposition and the circumstances of her death remain unexplained by medical authorities. Amanda's house has been demolished, but residents in the surrounding neighborhood report seeing a figure that matches Marcus Reed's description walking through their yards at night, apparently searching for a new host body to inhabit. Because some spirits don't just haunt houses. They consume the living to sustain their own existence, turning their victims into the very corpses they once were while stealing their life force to avoid the death they refuse to accept. My neighbor handed me a stack of printed emails yesterday and begged me to read them before she moves out of state. What she documented about the figure in her house will make you understand why some people abandon everything they own just to escape something they can't explain. This happened to Dr. Rachel Kim, a 42-year-old psychiatrist who prided herself on rational thinking and scientific explanations for unusual phenomena. Rachel lived in a restored 1920s craftsman house that she had spent 3 years renovating into her dream home. At exactly 11:47 p.m. every night, Rachel began noticing a dark, human-shaped figure walking through her living room. The figure moved slowly and deliberately, always following the same path from the front door to the back of the house. Rachel initially assumed she was seeing shadows from passing cars or reflections from streetlights. But the figure appeared even on nights when no vehicles were on her quiet residential street. The shadow person was clearly human-shaped, tall, wearing what appeared to be a long coat, walking upright with purposeful movement. But the figure cast no reflection in mirrors and left no footprints on Rachel's white carpet. Rachel began timing the appearances and discovered the shadow person maintained an exact schedule. Every night at 11:47 p.m. the figure would enter through the front wall of her house, walk across the living room and disappear into the back wall near her kitchen. The entire journey took exactly 4 minutes and 23 seconds, never varying by more than a few seconds. Rachel tried to interact with the shadow person by standing in its path, but the figure would walk directly through her body. She felt a sensation of intense cold and dread during these encounters. But the shadow person showed no awareness of her presence. As a psychiatrist, Rachel considered the possibility that she was experiencing hallucinations or psychological disturbances, but the figure appeared regardless of her mental state, medication, or stress levels. Rachel installed infrared cameras to document the phenomenon. The footage clearly showed a human-shaped heat signature moving through her house at the designated time, but the figure didn't register on regular video cameras. Rachel researched her house's history and discovered something that explained the shadow person's nightly routine. In 1943, the house had belonged to Harold Morrison, a night shift factory worker who was murdered during a home invasion robbery. Harold had been killed while walking from his front door to his kitchen after returning from work at exactly 11:47 p.m. The shadow person was Harold Morrison, endlessly repeating his final walk home on the night he was murdered 79 years earlier. But Rachel's investigation revealed something more disturbing about Harold's death. The murder had never been solved, and the killer had never been identified or arrested. Rachel discovered that Harold's spirit was trapped in a time loop, replaying his death every night because his murder remained unresolved. Rachel contacted police cold case investigators and shared her research about Harold Morrison's unsolved murder. Detective Sandra Martinez reopened the 1943 case using modern forensic techniques. The investigation led to the identification of Harold's killer, Robert Chen, who had died in 1987 but whose descendants still lived in Rachel's neighborhood. When Robert's family was confronted with evidence of his crime, they provided information that led to the official closure of Harold's murder case and a proper burial ceremony for his remains. After Harold Morrison's murder was officially solved and his case closed, the shadow person stopped appearing in Rachel's house. Rachel learned that some paranormal phenomena aren't supernatural hauntings. They're unresolved injustices that trap spirits in cycles of repetition until the truth is acknowledged and the dead receive the closure they deserved in life. Rachel now volunteers with cold case investigators, using her psychological expertise to help solve decades-old murders that may be causing similar spiritual disturbances in other homes. Because sometimes the figure walking through your house every night isn't there to haunt you. They're there to remind the living that some crimes are too important to remain forgotten, even by death. This morning, I received a package containing dozens of handwritten journals and a note saying, "Document this before I disappear completely." The journals describe something happening in a spare bedroom that will make you never want to live in a house with unexplained cold spots. This happened to Kevin Walsh, a 35-year-old software engineer who bought a 1950s ranch house in suburban Denver. The house was in perfect condition except for one spare bedroom that remained cold year-round, despite heating system repairs and insulation improvements. Kevin used the cold room for storage and rarely entered it, but after 3 months in the house, he began noticing something unusual about that specific room. At exactly 3:22 a.m. every night, Kevin could hear sounds coming from the cold room. Voices, footsteps, and what appeared to be normal household activities like cooking, cleaning, and conversations. Kevin investigated and discovered that the spare room was somehow replaying events from a different time period. Through the closed door, he could hear a family going about their daily routines from what sounded like the 1960s or 1970s. Kevin could hear children playing, adults having dinner conversations, television programs from decades past, and telephone conversations using rotary phones that hadn't existed in his house for years. Kevin opened the door during one of these episodes and saw something that defied all logic. The spare room contained furniture, decorations, and people from approximately 1973. A family was living their normal evening routine in Kevin's spare room, but they existed in a different time period than Kevin's present reality. Kevin could see Robert and Carol Henderson, along with their 2 young children, going about their activities as if they were living in the house during the Nixon presidency. The Henderson family couldn't see or interact with Kevin, but Kevin could observe their lives in complete detail. He watched them eat dinner, help children with homework, and discuss events from 1973 as if they were current news. Kevin discovered that he could enter the room and walk around the Henderson family's 1973 environment, but he remained invisible to them and couldn't interact with any objects from their time period. Kevin researched the Henderson family and found that they had indeed lived in his house from 1970 to 1974. Robert Henderson had died of a heart attack in December 1973, and the family had moved away shortly afterward. But somehow the spare room had trapped a segment of time from the Henderson family's residence, replaying the same evening from December 1973 over and over. Kevin realized he was witnessing Robert Henderson's final night alive. Every evening at 3:22 a.m., Kevin watched Robert suffer his fatal heart attack in the spare room, while his family tried desperately to save him. Kevin attempted to warn the Henderson family or change the outcome of Robert's death, but his presence in their timeline had no effect on their predetermined events. Kevin began documenting the Henderson family's nightly routine, recording their conversations and activities in detailed journals. He learned intimate details about their lives, relationships, and the events leading up to Robert's death. But Kevin discovered something horrifying about his ability to witness the time loop. Every night Kevin spent observing the Henderson family. He aged several months while they remained frozen in December 1973. Kevin was being pulled into their timeline, slowly losing his connection to the present reality. Kevin's reflection began showing a man from 1973. His hair styled differently, wearing clothes from that era, speaking in language patterns from the past. Kevin realized that the spare room wasn't just replaying the Henderson family's time. It was collecting observers and trapping them in the same temporal loop. Kevin found evidence that previous owners of the house had experienced similar phenomena. Several people had disappeared from the house over the decades, and Kevin now understood they had been absorbed into the time loop. Kevin's final journal entry described his decision to seal the spare room permanently and leave the house before he became permanently trapped in 1973 with the Henderson family. Kevin abandoned his house and moved across the country, but he told me that sometimes he still dreams about Robert Henderson's heart attack. and wakes up speaking in 1970s slang that he never learned. Because some rooms in old houses don't just hold memories, they hold actual pieces of time that can trap anyone curious enough to witness events that were never meant to be seen again. 3 days ago, I received the most disturbing voice message of my life from someone claiming they had murdered 5 people but couldn't remember doing it. What they told me about their house will make you question the difference between mental illness and supernatural possession. This happened to Ethan Graves, a 36-year-old accountant who inherited his grandmother's Victorian house in Salem, Massachusetts. Ethan had lived alone in the house for 8 months when he started experiencing what he thought were stress-related blackouts. The episodes began small. Ethan would lose a few hours here and there, finding himself in different rooms with no memory of how he got there. He assumed it was exhaustion from his demanding job and irregular sleep schedule, but the blackouts became more frequent and disturbing. Ethan would wake up to find himself standing in his kitchen at 3 a.m., holding a knife with no recollection of getting there or why he had a weapon in his hand. During one episode, Ethan regained consciousness to discover he was digging a hole in his backyard at midnight. His hands were bloody, his clothes were filthy, and he had no memory of going outside or why he was excavating his lawn. Ethan found the hole was exactly 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 4 feet deep, the dimensions of a grave. The next morning, Ethan checked local news and discovered that Margaret Walsh, an elderly woman from his neighborhood, had disappeared the previous night. Police found her car abandoned near Ethan's street. Ethan was horrified but convinced himself it was a coincidence. He filled in the hole and tried to ignore the connection between his blackout and the missing woman. But 3 days later, Ethan experienced another episode. He woke up in Margaret Walsh's house, standing over her body with blood on his hands. Margaret was dead and Ethan was holding the murder weapon. Ethan had absolutely no memory of killing her, breaking into her house, or even leaving his own home that night. But the most terrifying part was that during the murder, Ethan had been conscious. He remembered watching himself kill Margaret Walsh, but he couldn't control his actions or stop himself from committing the crime. It was as if something else was controlling his body while he remained aware and trapped inside his own mind. Ethan tried to call police but found himself unable to speak the words or dial the numbers. His body refused to cooperate with his attempts to confess or seek help. Over the next month, Ethan committed 4 more murders while fully conscious but completely unable to control his actions. Each time, he watched himself kill innocent people while his mind screamed for his body to stop. The victims were always neighbors or community members, and the murders were always committed with tools found in their own homes. Ethan would find himself in their houses, watch his hands kill them, then return home with no to report the crimes or seek help. During his conscious states, Ethan desperately researched his grandmother's house and discovered something that explained his condition. The house had been built in 1887 by Reverend Silas Blackwood, who had been secretly practicing demonic rituals while publicly serving as a Methodist minister. Reverend Blackwood had summoned entities that required human sacrifices to maintain their presence in the physical world. When Blackwood died in 1923, the demons remained bound to the house, waiting for another resident they could use as their vessel for continued killing. Ethan realized he was being possessed by demonic entities that forced him to commit murders while keeping him conscious to maximize his psychological torture. The demons wanted Ethan to experience the full horror of being a murderer while being powerless to prevent or report his crimes. Ethan tried everything: exorcism, psychiatric treatment, moving out of the house, but the demonic attachment followed him wherever he went. The entities had bonded with Ethan's soul and would continue using his body to kill until they collected enough human souls to manifest permanently in the physical realm. Ethan's final voice message to me described his plan to end the cycle. He was going to drive his car off a bridge during one of his conscious periods, killing himself before the demons could force him to murder anyone else. The next day, police found Ethan's car in the Merrimack River. His body was never recovered, but the murders in Salem stopped immediately after his disappearance. But Ethan's house remains empty and for sale. 3 families have attempted to move in over the past year, and all 3 families have experienced unexplained blackouts and violent impulses within weeks of occupancy. The realtor now discloses that the property may not be suitable for all buyers, but continues showing the house to unsuspecting families who are attracted by the low price and historic charm. Because some houses don't just shelter families, they harvest them for entities that need human hands to do their work and human souls to feed their eternal hunger. Yesterday morning, I found a USB drive in my mailbox with no return address. The files on it contain security footage from inside someone's house that will make you install cameras in every room of your home and check them obsessively. This happened to Nina Torres, a 29-year-old graphic designer who lived alone in a converted loft apartment in Portland. Nina had always been a deep sleeper and took medication for anxiety that made her drowsy, so she often slept through noise and disturbances. Nina first noticed something was wrong when she started finding evidence that someone had been in her apartment while she slept. Kitchen utensils would be in different drawers than where she left them. Her laptop would be moved to different locations. Food would disappear from her refrigerator overnight. Nina initially blamed her forgetfulness and the side effects of her anxiety medication, but the incidents became too frequent and specific to ignore. Nina would go to bed with her apartment clean and organized, then wake up to find furniture rearranged, personal items moved, and signs that someone had been using her shower, cooking in her kitchen, and sleeping in her guest bed. The most disturbing discovery was finding photographs of herself sleeping, taken from inside her bedroom during the night. Someone was entering her apartment, documenting her unconscious state and leaving the photos for her to find. Nina installed motion-activated cameras throughout her apartment and reviewed the footage each morning. What she discovered made her realize she was in immediate danger. A man wearing dark clothing and a ski mask was entering her apartment every night around 2 a.m. He had somehow obtained keys to her locks and security codes for her alarm system. The intruder would spend hours in Nina's apartment, going through her personal belongings, reading her journals, using her computer, and taking detailed photographs of everything in her home. But the most chilling footage showed the man standing over Nina's bed for long periods, watching her sleep and occasionally touching her face or hair while she remained unconscious. Nina called police and showed them the security footage. Detective Robert Chen launched an investigation and discovered that Nina was being stalked by Marcus Webb, a former maintenance worker who had serviced her building and gained access to master keys. Marcus had been entering Nina's apartment for over 6 months, learning intimate details about her life, routines, and personal habits. He had been gradually escalating his intrusions, preparing for something more sinister. When police searched Marcus's apartment, they found thousands of photographs of Nina, detailed journals documenting her daily activities, and plans for kidnapping her during one of his nightly visits. Marcus had been drugging Nina's food with additional sedatives to ensure she remained unconscious during his visits, which explained her memory gaps and deep sleep patterns. The investigation revealed that Marcus had been stalking multiple women using the same method, gaining access to apartment buildings through maintenance work, duplicating keys, and spending months learning about potential victims before escalating to physical crimes. Police found evidence linking Marcus to the disappearances of 3 other women who had lived in buildings where he had worked maintenance contracts. Marcus was arrested and charged with stalking, breaking and entering, and kidnapping in connection with the missing women cases. But Nina learned something that made her realize how close she had come to becoming another victim. Security footage from Marcus's apartment showed him practicing restraint techniques, building a soundproof room, and preparing supplies for long-term captivity of kidnapping victims. Nina's installation of security cameras had interrupted Marcus's timeline just days before he planned to abduct her permanently. The other 3 missing women had not been as fortunate. They had never realized they were being stalked until it was too late to protect themselves. Nina now works as a consultant for apartment security companies, helping them identify vulnerabilities that allow unauthorized access to residential buildings. But Nina told me that the most terrifying part wasn't that Marcus had been in her apartment. It was realizing how many nights she had been completely vulnerable to someone who was planning to destroy her life, and she had no idea the danger was happening just feet away from her sleeping body. Because sometimes the greatest threat to your safety isn't random crime. It's someone who has been studying you for months, learning your habits, and waiting for the perfect moment to take everything you'll never get back. Last Friday, a woman walked into the police station where I work as a detective, carrying a folder full of detailed descriptions of her own murder. What she told us about her nightly experiences will make you understand why some people are afraid to fall asleep. This is about Dr. Samantha Pike, a 38-year-old emergency room physician who had been experiencing what she thought were extremely vivid nightmares about being murdered in her own home. The dreams were so realistic that Samantha would wake up with physical pain in the locations where she had been killed in the nightmare. Samantha's death dreams followed the same pattern every night. At exactly 2:17 a.m., she would hear someone breaking into her house through the back door. She would try to call police, but her phone would be dead. She would attempt to escape, but all exits would be blocked or locked from the outside. The intruder would find Samantha hiding in her bedroom closet and kill her using different methods each night: stabbing, strangulation, blunt force trauma, or suffocation. Each death was excruciatingly painful and terrifyingly realistic. Samantha would experience every moment of dying: the fear, the pain, the gradual loss of consciousness, and the final moment when her heart stopped beating. Then she would wake up in her bed at exactly 6:30 a.m., alive and unharmed, but emotionally traumatized by the realistic death experience. As an emergency physician, Samantha was familiar with trauma and stress-related disorders, so she initially attributed the dreams to work-related PTSD from treating violent crime victims in the ER. But after 6 weeks of nightly death dreams, Samantha noticed something that made her question whether these were actually dreams. During each death scenario, Samantha retained perfect memory of all previous deaths. She would try to change her actions, hide in different locations, or call for help earlier, but the outcome was always identical: death at 2:17 a.m. More disturbing was Samantha's discovery that she had detailed knowledge about her house and surroundings during these experiences that she didn't possess while awake. She knew about structural details, hidden spaces, and security vulnerabilities that she had never noticed during her conscious hours. Samantha began documenting every death experience in precise detail, recording the methods used, the duration of each attack, and any variations in the intruder's behavior or appearance. After analyzing 2 months of death records, Samantha realized the experiences weren't random nightmares. They were methodical rehearsals of an actual murder that someone was planning to commit against her. Samantha contacted police and reported her concerns about the death dreams, believing someone was using psychological warfare to torment her before carrying out a real attack. Detective Angela Foster took Samantha's report seriously and conducted a thorough investigation of her home, personal relationships, and potential threats. The investigation revealed something that confirmed Samantha's worst fears. Her house showed evidence of multiple break-ins that Samantha had never detected, subtle signs that someone had been entering regularly, studying the layout, and testing various attack scenarios. Detective Foster found hidden cameras throughout Samantha's house, surveillance equipment that had been monitoring her daily routines for months. The cameras were connected to a remote location where someone was watching Samantha's every movement and planning the optimal strategy for her murder. Forensic analysis of the surveillance equipment led police to Marcus Reed, Samantha's former patient who blamed her for his wife's death during an emergency room visit 8 months earlier. Marcus had been planning Samantha's murder for months, using the hidden cameras to study her habits and the psychological torture of realistic death dreams, to maximize her suffering before the actual killing. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing about Samantha's death loop experiences. Marcus had been using experimental technology to project realistic death scenarios directly into Samantha's mind while she slept. The equipment created artificial experiences that were indistinguishable from reality, allowing Marcus to test different murder methods without actually killing Samantha. Marcus's plan was to psychologically torture Samantha with hundreds of realistic death experiences before selecting the most effective method for her actual murder. The technology Marcus was using had been developed for military applications, creating realistic combat simulations that soldiers could experience as if they were real battles. Marcus had obtained the equipment illegally and modified it for psychological torture. Samantha had been experiencing actual simulated deaths. Her brain was processing these experiences as completely real events, including all the physical and emotional trauma of dying, but her body remained alive in her bed. Police arrested Marcus before he could carry out the real murder, but the psychological damage to Samantha was severe and permanent. She had experienced her own death over 150 times in vivid, realistic detail. Samantha required extensive psychological treatment to recover from the trauma of repeated simulated death experiences. The artificial memories of dying were indistinguishable from real memories, making it difficult for Samantha to trust her own perceptions. The investigation revealed that Marcus had used this same technology to torture 3 other people he blamed for personal tragedies. 2 victims had committed suicide to escape the nightly death experiences, and 1 victim had suffered complete psychological breakdown. Marcus was convicted of multiple charges related to psychological torture, illegal surveillance, and conspiracy to commit murder. The military technology he had used was classified as a weapon and banned from civilian use. Samantha now works with law enforcement to identify other cases of technological psychological warfare and helps develop detection methods for synthetic memory implantation. But Samantha told me that even 2 years later, she sometimes wakes up unsure whether she's actually alive or experiencing another death simulation, because the artificial memories of dying are just as vivid and convincing as her real memories of living. Because some forms of torture don't leave physical scars, they leave psychological wounds that make victims question the difference between life and death, reality and simulation, making every moment of consciousness feel like it might be the last. This story is something very different from what we usually hear in horror tales. Most possession stories involve demons controlling people's minds or actions, but what happened to this woman involved something far more intimate and terrifying. A demonic entity that used her body to create life in the most horrific way imaginable. This is about Dr. Helena Cross, a 41-year-old reproductive specialist who had dedicated her career to helping women who struggled with fertility issues. Helena had never been able to have children herself due to medical complications, which made her passionate about her work at the Denver Fertility Center. Helena's nightmare began on a Tuesday morning when she woke up nauseous and exhausted despite having no reason to feel sick. As a fertility doctor, Helena immediately recognized the symptoms but dismissed them as impossible. She had been medically unable to conceive for over 15 years. But when Helena took a pregnancy test, it came back positive. Multiple tests from different manufacturers all confirmed the same impossible result. Helena was pregnant despite having no functioning reproductive capacity. Helena underwent comprehensive medical testing and discovered something that defied all medical knowledge. She was carrying a fetus that was developing normally, but her reproductive system showed no signs of the hormonal changes or physical adaptations that accompany natural pregnancy. The fetus was growing inside Helena's body without triggering any of the biological processes that should have been necessary to sustain pregnancy. It was as if something else was providing the energy and nutrients needed for fetal development. More disturbing was Helena's discovery that she had no memory of conception. She had been celibate for over 6 months and had not been sexually active around the time when conception would have occurred. Helena consulted with her colleague Dr. Martin Webb, who conducted ultrasound examinations and found something that made both doctors deeply uncomfortable. The fetus appeared to be developing faster than normal human gestation. Within 4 weeks of Helena's positive pregnancy test, the ultrasound showed fetal development consistent with 12 weeks of pregnancy. But the most alarming discovery was that the fetus was not positioned in Helena's uterus. The developing entity was growing freely throughout her abdominal cavity, somehow sustaining itself by drawing nutrients directly from Helena's organs and blood supply. Helena began experiencing severe abdominal pain and rapid weight loss as the fetus continued growing. Medical scans showed that the developing entity was literally consuming Helena's internal organs to fuel its accelerated growth. Helena's liver, kidneys, and other organs were shrinking and showing signs of systematic consumption, as if something was digesting her from the inside while keeping her alive to serve as a host. Dr. Webb attempted to perform emergency surgery to remove the fetus, but during the procedure, he discovered something that forced him to stop the operation immediately. The entity growing inside Helena was not a human fetus. It had developed tentacles, multiple rows of teeth, and organs that didn't exist in human anatomy. The creature was connected to Helena's nervous system and cardiovascular network in ways that made surgical removal impossible without killing Helena instantly. Helena was conscious during the surgery and could feel the creature moving inside her, responding to attempts to remove it by burrowing deeper into her organs and tightening its grip on her vital systems. Helena realized she was being used as an incubator for something that intended to consume her completely during its development process. Helena researched her recent activities and discovered that 3 months earlier she had treated a patient named Margaret Thorne, an elderly woman who had come to the fertility clinic seeking treatment for her adult daughter. Margaret had been carrying old religious artifacts and had insisted on performing what she called blessing rituals in Helena's office. Margaret had claimed the rituals would help Helena understand the true purpose of motherhood. Helena found Margaret Thorne's contact information and discovered that Margaret had died 2 weeks after her clinic visit. But Margaret's obituary revealed that she had been known in her community as a practitioner of dark religious ceremonies involving fertility and demonic summoning. Helena realized that Margaret had used their clinic meeting to implant a demonic entity in Helena's body through supernatural means rather than natural conception. The entity growing inside Helena was a demon spawn that required a human host for its development phase. Margaret had selected Helena because her medical knowledge would allow her to understand what was happening but not prevent it. Helena's condition deteriorated rapidly as the demon spawn consumed more of her internal organs. She was losing weight daily while her abdomen continued expanding to accommodate the growing creature. Helena made a desperate decision to end the pregnancy through experimental treatment that would likely kill both her and the entity. She began taking massive doses of antiparasitic medications and exposure to electromagnetic radiation that would be toxic to supernatural entities. The treatment caused Helena excruciating pain as the demon spawn fought to maintain its hold on her body. Helena could feel the creature clawing at her organs and injecting toxins into her bloodstream to prevent her from destroying it. After 2 weeks of intensive treatment, Helena succeeded in killing the demon spawn, but the damage to her body was severe and permanent. The creature had consumed 60% of her liver, damaged her kidneys, and left scar tissue throughout her abdominal cavity. Helena survived, but required multiple organ transplants, and will need lifelong medical care due to the internal damage caused by hosting the demonic entity. Helena now specializes in treating women who report impossible pregnancies or supernatural fertility experiences. She's identified 12 other cases where women were impregnated by demonic entities using similar methods. But Helena told me that the most terrifying aspect wasn't the physical damage. It was the realization that she had been selected months in advance by someone who studied her vulnerabilities and used her career helping other women as a weapon against her. Because some demons don't possess people to control their actions. They possess people to use their bodies as breeding grounds for the next generation of supernatural entities that will continue the cycle of human harvest for purposes we can never understand. 2 weeks ago, my sister Claire called me sobbing, convinced that everyone in our family was lying to her about her identity. What she discovered in her own house will make you photograph every room in your home and check those photos daily. This is about Claire Robertson, a 33-year-old freelance photographer who lived alone in a converted warehouse loft in Minneapolis. Claire had always been meticulous about her living space, with everything organized exactly how she wanted it after 5 years of carefully curating her perfect home. Claire first noticed something was wrong when she woke up one Tuesday morning to find a coffee mug in her kitchen that she'd never seen before. It was a plain white mug with "World's Best Mom" printed on the side, sitting in her cabinet next to her usual black mugs. Claire had no children and had never owned anything with "Mom" written on it. She threw the mug away, assuming a friend had left it during a recent visit. But the next morning, Claire found 3 more unfamiliar items in her kitchen: a children's cereal box, a bottle of prenatal vitamins, and a refrigerator magnet with a photo of a toddler she didn't recognize. Claire was disturbed, but assumed someone was playing an elaborate prank on her. She checked her locks, changed her security codes, and installed additional cameras throughout her loft. Over the next week, unfamiliar objects continued appearing in Claire's home every night. Children's toys, family photos showing Claire with people she'd never met, baby clothes in sizes that suggested Claire had a young child. But the most unsettling discoveries were personal documents with Claire's name on them: a birth certificate for a child named Emma Robertson, medical records showing Claire had given birth 2 years earlier, and insurance policies listing Claire as the mother of a toddler. Claire had never been pregnant, never had a child, and had no memory of anyone named Emma Robertson. Claire contacted the hospital listed on the medical records, but they confirmed that Claire Robertson had indeed given birth to Emma Robertson on the date shown in the documents. The hospital had detailed records of Claire's pregnancy, delivery, and postpartum care. Claire demanded to see the records in person and discovered something that made her question her sanity. The hospital files contained Claire's signature on dozens of documents, her handwriting in medical questionnaires, and photographs of Claire holding a newborn baby in the maternity ward. Claire had absolutely no memory of any of these events, but the evidence was undeniable and official. Claire's investigation became more desperate when she found a key hidden in her jewelry box. A key she'd never seen before, attached to a keychain that read "Emma's Daycare." The key led Claire to a daycare center 15 minutes from her home, where staff members greeted her warmly and asked why she hadn't been picking up Emma for the past 2 weeks. The daycare director, Mrs. Patricia Chen, showed Claire detailed records of Emma Robertson's enrollment, Claire's emergency contact information, and security footage of Claire dropping off and picking up a 2-year-old girl on dozens of occasions. Claire watched herself on the security footage, but she had no memory of ever visiting this daycare or interacting with the child the staff called Emma. Mrs. Chen was concerned about Claire's apparent memory loss and suggested she might be experiencing postpartum depression or psychological trauma related to single motherhood. Claire demanded to see Emma immediately. Mrs. Chen brought out a beautiful 2-year-old girl with curly brown hair who ran directly to Claire, calling her Mama and hugging her legs affectionately. Claire felt no recognition or emotional connection to this child, but Emma clearly knew Claire intimately and expected maternal care and attention. Claire took Emma home, hoping that spending time with the child would trigger her lost memories. But being with Emma felt like caring for a complete stranger's child, despite overwhelming evidence that Emma was her daughter. Claire's loft had been gradually transformed to accommodate a toddler. Child-proofing, toys, a crib, children's books, and all the supplies needed to care for a 2-year-old had appeared in her home over the past month. Claire realized that someone had been systematically erasing her memory of being a mother while simultaneously providing evidence that contradicted her recollections of her own life. Claire hired Dr. Michael Torres, a neurologist, to evaluate her condition. Brain scans showed that Claire had experienced selective memory loss consistent with targeted pharmaceutical intervention. Someone had been drugging Claire with specific compounds that erased memories related to her daughter while leaving other memories intact. The investigation revealed that Claire's ex-boyfriend, David Walsh, had been conducting an elaborate psychological experiment on Claire as revenge for their breakup 2 years earlier. David had kidnapped Emma from her biological mother and convinced Claire through drugs and manipulation that Emma was her own child. David had then systematically erased Claire's memory of becoming a mother while leaving behind evidence that made Claire question her own sanity. David's goal was to drive Claire into complete psychological breakdown by making her unable to trust her own memories or perception of reality. Police arrested David and rescued Emma, who was returned to her actual mother. Claire's memories gradually returned as the drugs cleared her system, but the psychological damage of not being able to trust her own mind took months to overcome. Claire learned that David had been entering her home nightly for over a month, gradually introducing items and documents while drugging her food and water with memory-erasing compounds he had obtained through illegal pharmaceutical contacts. Claire now works with law enforcement to identify similar cases of psychological abuse and memory manipulation. She's helped convict 3 other perpetrators who used pharmaceutical mind control to torture their victims. But Claire told me that the most terrifying part wasn't that someone had erased her memories. It was realizing that for weeks she had been living in someone else's version of her life and had no way to distinguish between what was real and what had been implanted in her reality. Because sometimes the most effective way to destroy someone isn't to hurt their body. It's to make them unable to trust their own mind, leaving them trapped in a reality they can't verify or escape.